Archaeologists have discovered a huge ancient city hidden underground in Mexico, which may give a better understanding of the Maya civilization.
A book survived the Spanish fires in the 1500s. Inside, Maya scribes drew a massive flood destroying the world, water pouring from a serpent's mouth, gods unleashing chaos. For centuries, nobody knew what it meant. Then came 2012, and everyone panicked. But nothing happened. Now researchers say, we got the date wrong. The real prophecy talks about a different time. They found references to facing our reflection and Great Awakening. The year keeps coming up is 2025. And this time, the signs in the sky match what the Maya wrote. To understand Maya prophecies, you first have to look at the way they tracked time. They didn't use just one calendar. They used 4, and every one of them had a different purpose. The first was called the Tzolkin. It worked on a 260-day cycle. That might sound random, but to the Maya, it was sacred. They combined 20 different day names with the numbers 1 through 13, creating a repeating rhythm of days that shaped rituals, ceremonies, and even a person's future. Parents would consult this calendar to choose names for their babies. Every day had its own meaning. Being born on the wrong one could shape your whole life. Then came the Hab. This one was more familiar to us today. It followed the sun. It had 18 months, each with 20 days. That gave them 360 days. Then they added 5 more days at the end of the year, called Wayeb. But those 5 days weren't celebrated. They were feared. People stayed home, avoided travel, and canceled big plans. They believed those were dangerous, unlucky days when anything could go wrong. But Maya prophecy didn't just rely on individual calendars. They combined them. When the 260-day Tzolkin and the 365-day Hab lined up, it created what they called a calendar round. This unique combination only repeated once every 52 years. That cycle helped priests track major events, like eclipses, seasons, or sacred ceremonies. It was how they looked into the future without ever writing a single horoscope. Still, that wasn't enough for the Maya. They needed to record the truly big dates: creation, destruction, rebirth. That's where the long count calendar came in. It was built to stretch across thousands of years. It started with the smallest unit, Kiyin, a single day. Then came Winal, which was 20 days, then Atun, or 360 days, then Kayatun, which was 7,200 days, and finally a Baktun, 144,000 days. That's nearly 400 years. But here's the twist. The Maya didn't think time moved in a straight line. They saw it as a circle. Every ending was just the beginning of something else. When a Baktun ended, it wasn't the end of the world. It was the start of a new era. That's what most people misunderstood in 2012. They thought the Maya predicted an apocalypse. But what they actually saw was a reset. A moment when one great cycle ends and another begins. For over a century, experts tried to make sense of one of the Maya civilization's most puzzling mysteries, the 819-day calendar. It looked like a strange number with no clear connection to anything. But in 2023, everything changed. 2 anthropologists, John Linden and Victoria Bricker, finally cracked the code. The answer had been hiding in plain sight. You couldn't understand the calendar by looking at a few years. You had to watch it over 20 full cycles. That's nearly 45 years. And when they did, something incredible happened. The calendar suddenly lined up with the movements of the planets, every single one visible to the naked eye. Mercury matched with every 819-day cycle. Venus lined up every 5th cycle. Saturn every 6th. Jupiter every 19th. And Mars, the farthest visible planet, aligned every 20th. This wasn't just a calendar. It was a master plan. It meant the Maya could track and even predict where planets would be, centuries into the future. What once looked like superstition was actually advanced astronomy. Their so-called prophecies weren't mystical. They were math. But that was just the beginning. Much of what we know today about the Maya came from a handful of books that barely escaped destruction. The Spanish burned almost everything in the 1500s, but 4 books, 4 codices, survived. They weren't myths. They were real records, written on bark paper using natural ink, and filled with numbers, cycles, and sky maps. The most complete one is called the Dresden Codex. It was written between 1200 and 1250 AD. Inside, there are tables showing solar and lunar eclipses. It tracks the Venus cycle, 584 days, with pinpoint accuracy. It even hints at floods and cosmic resets, but many experts believe those are creation stories, not warnings of doom. Then there's the Paris Codex, created sometime between 1450 and 1500. It lays out something called Catastrophe prophecies. These were not wild predictions. They were tied to 13 time blocks, each one lasting 700 days. Together, they spanned exactly 256 years. Researcher Werner Nahm showed that all these prophecies pointed to real historical events. Again, not magic, just history written through the stars and seasons. The third one, the Madrid Codex, was more practical. Also made around the 1400s, it gave day-by-day instructions for rituals, farming, and when to hold ceremonies. It was like a guidebook for daily life, helping people time their work with nature. And the oldest of all is the Grolier Codex, now called the Mexico Codex. For years, people thought it was fake. But in 2018, tests showed the ink and bark dated back to 1021 AD. That makes it the oldest known Maya book. Inside, it focused entirely on Venus, where it would rise, when it would disappear, and what it meant. For over 1,000 years, the ancient Maya watched the skies with an obsession that shaped every part of their world. From 250 to 900 AD, their cities like Copan, Tikal, and Palenque weren't just temples and palaces. They were observatories. Their rulers didn't just wear crowns. They studied the stars. They used calendars and prophecy not for storytelling, but to rule empires and decide when to go to war. Everything was timed. Every war, every ceremony, every construction project followed the heavens. These kings claimed their power came from the gods, but behind it all was math, astronomy, and a deep understanding of time. Recent DNA studies show these cities remained stable for centuries, which suggests something rare. Their system actually worked. They weren't predicting random disasters. They were using prophecy to survive real environmental and political shifts. But around 900 AD, things changed. The great cities emptied out. No one knows exactly why. Yet the Maya didn't vanish. They adapted. In the Yucatan and highlands of Guatemala, they kept their sacred knowledge alive, quietly, secretly, through stories and texts. The most famous of these are the books of Chilimbalam. These weren't just history books. They mixed myth with fact, astronomy with memory. They didn't fear time ending. They believed in cycles. What goes around, comes around. And they were right. In these later writings, Maya scribes predicted something chilling: the arrival of foreign invaders from across the sea. They didn't name the Spanish, but the clues were there: white-skinned strangers, metal weapons, strange animals, and the end of an age. It sounded impossible at the time, but it wasn't fiction. The prophecy struck its final chord in 1697. That's when the Spanish attacked the last free Maya kingdom, Nopeten, ruled by the Itza. Their king, Snake Star, had already seen it coming. According to scholars like David Stewart, he believed his defeat would mark the end of one calendar era and the start of another. Not death, transition. And that's exactly what happened. On March 13, 1697, Spanish forces took the city. The Maya weren't surprised. They had predicted their own conquest to the day. Their calendar didn't say the world would end. It said their world would change. And it did. But what we often call prophecies were not simple predictions. They were echoes of cycles, layered meanings that connected kings to the cosmos. One of the most misunderstood examples comes from the 7th century. In the year 669 CE, Maya scribes in what is now Tabasco, Mexico, carved something curious onto a stone monument, now called Monument 6 from Tortuguero. Most of the inscription talked about a king named Bahlam Ajao, but near the end, there was something different. It mentioned a future date, 13-0-0-0-0.0 Ajah 3 Kankan. That doesn't mean much to most people, but scholars figured it out. That date matches December 21st, 2012 in our calendar. Yes, that 2012. The text is damaged, but part of it is still readable. One version says, "It will be completed, the 13th Baktun, and it will happen." A seeing. It is the display of Bolon Yokte Ku in a great investiture. That last name, Bolon Yokte Ku, might sound unfamiliar. He was a mysterious Maya god, often linked to creation and war, and especially tied to the endings of time cycles. He's shown with incense bags and ropes, symbols of offerings or sacrifices. To the Maya, seeing Bolon Yokte appear during a calendar shift wasn't frightening. It was expected. It meant the cosmic gears were turning again. Something important was ending, and something else was beginning. But the real story here isn't about destruction. It's about power. Scholars believe the monument wasn't about the end of the world at all. Instead, it likely helped Bahlam Ajah claim more authority by linking his reign to a massive time cycle. It's like a king today saying, "I did this right before the millennium." He's not warning about the apocalypse. He's bragging. That's how the Maya worked. They used dates to anchor meaning, not predict doom. Still, centuries later, that didn't stop the modern world from misunderstanding it completely. As 2012 got closer, people across the globe started to panic. Books flew off shelves. Documentaries aired non-stop. Websites screamed warnings. They said the Maya had predicted the end of the world. Hollywood joined in too. The movie 2012 made over $700 million by feeding into the fear. But Maya experts, the real ones, were baffled. They tried to explain that no ancient Maya text ever said the world would end. Not even close. One of the leading voices was epigrapher Stephen Houston. He reminded everyone that Maya texts often referred to future dates just to compare them to the present. It was poetic, not prophetic. Kind of like saying, what we do now will matter 1,000 years from today. That's not a warning, it's a mirror. Even the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which has a piece of the Tortuguero monument, clarified the message. They said the scribes were commemorating a historical event by tying it to a cosmic anniversary. Like writing, "Our king did this just before the new year." But the damage was done. The public latched onto the 2012 myth and refused to let go. It became one of the biggest apocalyptic rumors of modern times, right alongside Y2K and Nostradamus, all based on a few weathered glyphs that were never meant to scare anyone. In the 8th century, deep in the city of Palenque in what is now Chiapas, Mexico, the Maya were already thinking far beyond their own time. On the western panel of the Temple of the Inscriptions, the scribes carved something astonishing into stone. They recorded the birth of King Kianich Janab Pakal in the year 603 CE and his coronation in 615 CE. That alone was impressive record-keeping. But they didn't stop there. The inscription then added something called a distance number, 10.11 to 10.5.8. It may look like random dots and dashes to most people today, but to the Maya, it meant something very specific. It was a count of days. When you do the math, It points to a date more than 4,000 years in the future, October 21st, 4772 CE. Yes, 4772. To put that into perspective, this future date is farther from today than the Maya themselves are from the birth of Christ. And yet, they marked that distant day with a clear message. There will be a celebration of King Pakal's reign. Not might be, not could be. It says, there will be. This wasn't just a fancy way to talk about eternity. It was a bold statement. The Maya were saying that Pakal's rule and the cosmic order he was part of would still matter thousands of years later. They saw time not as something that ends, but as something that repeats, cycle after cycle. By that distant year, 80 full calendar rounds would have passed since Pakal became king. That's 80 lifetimes of repeating time. What makes this so important today is how it changes what we think about the Maya calendar. A lot of people panicked in 2012, thinking the Maya predicted the end of the world when the 13th Baktun cycle ended. But the Maya themselves clearly didn't see that as the end. In fact, this very inscription proves the opposite. To the Maya, time stretched on far into the future. The year 4772 wasn't the end of anything. It was just another chapter, a celebration waiting to happen. And instead of fearing that moment, they embraced it. Modern scholars now point to this Palanque prophecy to shut down the idea that the Maya predicted doomsday. There's no panic in their records, no fear, just a quiet confidence that the world would still be here, that the calendar would continue, and that the memory of their kings would still matter long after they were gone. Deep in the jungle of Quintana Roo, Mexico, there's a massive stone monument that tells a story almost too big for the human mind to grasp. It's called Stela 1, and it was built by the ancient Maya around the 8th century CE in the city of Coba. At first glance, it's just a weathered slab of stone, but carved into its surface is one of the most mind-bending messages ever left behind by any civilization. This isn't just a calendar. It's a cosmic clock that stretches beyond anything we could ever imagine. The Maya were obsessed with time, how it worked, how it repeated, and how it connected everything. But the inscription on this monument takes that obsession to an extreme. It records a date so massive, so outrageously large, that modern scientists had to write it in exponential form. The inscription begins with the number 13, but not just once or twice. The number 13 is repeated 19 times. Then it ends with 0.000.0.0. This is not a normal calendar. It's what one expert, Maya scholar Linda Shealy, called a cosmic odometer. Imagine the mileage counter in a car. Every time it hits 9, it rolls over to 0, and the next number ticks up. That's what the Maya were doing with time. Except this odometer doesn't just count years or centuries. It counts trillions upon trillions of years. Scientists tried to calculate what this date actually meant in modern terms. If each of those 13s counted time the same way the Maya's calendar did, the date would fall about 28 years in the future. That's a number with 28 zeros. To put it in perspective, the age of our universe is estimated to be around 13.8 billion years. The Coba monument speaks of a span of time that is 2 quintillion times longer than that. This wasn't a prophecy of doom, it was the opposite. The Maya weren't predicting the end of the world. They were saying time never ends. It loops, it cycles, and it continues beyond anything we could ever live to see. When people panicked over the year 2012, thinking the world would end based on the Maya calendar, they missed the point entirely. The ancient Maya weren't counting down to destruction. They were showing how time is limitless, how creation itself stretches far back and far forward, into realms even the gods themselves couldn't fully control. The Coba Stela wasn't meant to scare anyone. It was meant to humble us. It reminded those who saw it that we live inside something so vast, so infinite, that our little moment in time is just a blink. One of the most mysterious sources is a book called the Dresden Codex, created sometime between the 13th and 15th centuries. It isn't a storybook or a history manual. It's a kind of cosmic instruction guide. Painted on bark paper, it's filled with almanacs, astronomy charts, and rituals meant to align life with the universe. One page, page 74, shows something shocking. A massive water serpent unleashes a flood from the sky. A god named Chak, holding lightning, seems to be destroying the world. Everything is drowning in water. This image fueled modern fears that the Maya predicted a future apocalypse. Back in 2012, people all over the world pointed to this exact scene as proof that the world was going to end. It looked like a cosmic reset, and it wasn't hard to see why. The illustration shows chaos, water pouring down from the heavens, and divine figures wiping the slate clean. But here's the truth. The scene doesn't include any future date. There's no countdown, no timeline. It's more like a warning wrapped in myth. Maya scholars say it was probably connected to their creation stories, where floods often marked the end of one world and the birth of another. In Maya beliefs, the universe doesn't just move forward, it turns in cycles. Destruction and rebirth happen over and over again. And even though the Dresden Codex contains some of the most advanced Venus and eclipse tables ever created, accurate across centuries, it doesn't actually predict world events. The flood image might look apocalyptic, but to Maya priests, it was likely a symbol used in rituals to read omens, not predict doomsday. Still, people keep projecting their fears onto it, twisting ancient wisdom into modern panic. Now move forward to the 16th and 17th centuries. The Spanish had arrived, colonization was underway, and Maya scribes were trying to preserve what they could. That's when the books of Chilambalam appeared. These were handwritten texts, compiled from older oral traditions, and they contained something even more mysterious: actual prophecies. A Chilam was a prophet, someone believed to speak for the gods. These books recorded visions based on katuns, 20-year periods in the Maya calendar. Each katun had a personality, a set of likely events. And Maya historians noticed that history repeated itself during certain katuns. Over centuries, they tracked what happened during each one, building a kind of predictive model from the past. One of the most eerie examples comes from the Maya city of Tayasal, ruled by the Itza people. Sometime around 1618, Spanish friars met the Itza king. He told them something unforgettable. He said, "It is not yet time to abandon our gods. The prophecies tell us the time will yet come, in the age of 8 Ahau." He was talking about a specific katun, and he told the Spaniards to come back later. What's chilling is what happened next. Nearly 80 years later, in 1697, Tayasal fell to the Spanish. And yes, it was during the exact katun the king had mentioned, 8 Ahau. It sounds impossible, but this wasn't magic. This was the Maya belief that each katun carried a pattern, and people acted accordingly. Here's why that matters. The Itza knew that every time 8 Ahau appeared, disaster followed. Long before, in earlier cycles, major cities like Chichen Itza and Chakanputun were abandoned during 8 Ahau periods. So by the time the katun came back around, the Itza were already expecting catastrophe. Their prophecy became a self-fulfilling one. People prepared for doom, and doom followed. Even the Spanish took notice. They knew about the prophecy and planned their final attack when the katun turned. In a strange way, the Maya and the Spaniards were both acting out a script written in the stars. But these katun prophecies didn't only predict defeat. One passage in the Chilambalam described foreign people arriving with a new god during a certain katun, and that matched the timeline of the Spanish arrival and Christianity's spread. To the Spaniards, it was both terrifying and impressive. The Maya seemed to know something was coming, and to modern eyes, it proves something incredible. These weren't wild guesses. These were real systems of time and belief, backed by patterns tracked across generations. The Maya didn't think in straight lines. They thought in circles. What happened before would happen again. The past wasn't just history, it was a map of the future. Back in 2012, millions were convinced the world would end. People stocked up on food, quit their jobs, and waited for a cataclysm the ancient Maya supposedly foresaw. Of course, it didn't happen. But now, in the shadow of chaos and climate disasters, whispers of another date are making the rounds, 2025. And this time, the prophecy comes with new language, a fresh interpretation, and just enough mystery to spark panic and hope. According to online claims, a newly decoded Maya prophecy talks about 2025 as a year of massive change. The wording sounds dramatic. Shadows will cover the earth. We will face our own reflection, and only then will humanity begin a great awakening. In plain terms, it predicts disaster first, war, floods, collapse, then spiritual renewal. Some claim this is all tied to planetary alignments in early 2025. 5 planets will align in the sky. And to many, that seems too poetic to be a coincidence, but others dig deeper. They say this is more than just stargazing. It's the end of an era in Maya cosmology. A symbolic door is closing, and another is opening. It's not the first time people have said that. Around 2000, Latin America was flooded with talk of the 7 Maya prophecies. These included ideas like a time of fear and materialism will end, climate and wars will shake the world, and humanity must evolve spiritually or face destruction. But here's the catch. These weren't actual prophecies from stone carvings. They were modern philosophies inspired by ancient Maya ideas, mixed with New Age beliefs and rebranded wisdom. Beautiful, yes. Ancient, not exactly. The same thing seems to be happening now. The poetic phrases like shadows covering the earth don't actually come from any classic-era inscriptions. They sound more like verses from the books of Chilimbalam, written after the Spanish conquest. Those texts did speak of doom and rebirth. One line from the Chilimbalam of Tizimin reads, "Darkness descended, the sun was extinguished, and the judgment came." It's dramatic, almost biblical. But these writings were often retrofitted to past tragedies, like the arrival of the Spanish, not used to predict future ones. If we look at real Maya cosmology, they did believe in cycles. Big ones. Their long count calendar began in 3114 BCE. It completed 13 baktuns, each roughly 394 years long, by December 2012. That's why 2012 was seen as a big deal. But the Maya never said the world would end. To them, it was just the start of the 14th baktun, which began on December 22, 2012, and will last until 2407 CE. That's more than 380 years left in the current cycle. In other words, 2025 isn't a major calendar reset. Still, there are other cycles in Maya timekeeping. One is the 52-year calendar round, which links solar and ritual calendars. Interestingly, 1973 to 2025 is exactly 52 years, and 1973 was the year New Age author José Argüelles began connecting Maya time cycles with cosmic change. Coincidence? Probably, but it's the kind of pattern that keeps the mystery alive. Then there's Venus, a planet the Maya closely tracked. The Dresden Codex, one of their most advanced surviving texts, includes a Venus table to predict its appearance and link it to omens, especially war. The Maya believed if Venus rose in a certain part of the sky, it meant something dangerous was coming. They even said things like, if thunder is heard in the south, or if there's a solar eclipse, expect deadly epidemics. These weren't specific dates. They were warnings based on natural signs. So could the planetary alignment in February 2025 be one of those signs? It's possible someone would interpret it that way. But the Maya didn't mark 2025 as a unique turning point in their calendar. That part seems to be a modern invention. Even modern Maya elders have pushed back against all this. Before 2012, Guatemalan Maya leaders held public ceremonies to reject doomsday claims, reminding the world that their calendar never predicted the end, only renewal. They spoke of moving from the fourth sun to the fifth sun, a concept actually borrowed from Aztec cosmology, symbolizing struggle followed by enlightenment. But in recent years, the world has felt unstable. Wildfires, floods, wars, plagues. It's no wonder people are searching for patterns. That's why the 2025 prophecy, even if it's stitched together from poetic fragments and modern fears, feels powerful. It speaks to a collective anxiety, a sense that the world is shaking, and we need something to believe in. But this says more about us than it does about the Maya. As scholars like Matthew Restel and Amara Solari point out, these prophecies reveal how modern people project their fears onto ancient cultures. We crave answers. We want to believe someone saw this coming, that we aren't spinning in chaos. We're just going through the necessary darkness before the dawn.